dedicate the class today. So I'm going to read what she gave me. Her learning is dedicated in memory of Doris's mother, Leah Mosak. I said correctly? Okay. Today would be her 100th birthday. She was a Holocaust survivor who endured 2.5 years in Auschwitz, 4 more camps, and the Death March. She lost everything and everybody, but never lost herself, always fighting to help others live one more day. She survived to delight in her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She used her voice to tell the world about the Holocaust and was an inspiration to all who knew her. Additionally, a refuah shlema for Doris' daughter, Ora Bat Devora. Does anyone else want to throw in a dedication for our class? Okay. Yeah?
Can I throw in a name for finding her there?
Of course.
Finding setup?
Yes.
Hannah Shimona Bat Naomi Ruffle.
Chana
Shimona.
Shimona Bat Naomi Rachel. Okay, may she find her beshert, her spouse.
And then I actually do have a
Bakarov.
Just passed away. So for his
An Elias Neshama.
thank you. Yes, Shlomo ben Abraham Hassan.
Shlomo ben Avraham Hassan.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So those are our dedications. Yours. Dov Ber ben Rivka. Avraham Yosef ben Devasha Shendel. Okay, may they have refuah shalema, refuas hanefesh, refuas haguf. All right, I'm Kreindel Pinkus. I actually taught at the L'chaim Center over 30 years ago. And it was in a very different place at that time. It was in the Begin's home in Deerfield. And we ran once a week a program where I taught teens and Rabbi Begin taught their parents. And then we would swap for the second class. We did it one night a week, and it was a lot of fun. And it's been a very long time. And I'm really delighted to be asked to teach once again in the L'chaim Center and share our Torah together. Right. So I actually do have a handout for those who are here. It's pretty simple. So even if you don't have it, it's pretty easy to take notes for anyone who wants to. So here we go. Our class is a 3-week class that is running during what we call the period called Bein HaMitzarim, these 3 weeks. Mitzarim, the root of the word, is there's a couple of different interpretations that were given to me. One is the word tsar, like in Yiddish tsaris. So between the troubles, meaning that we begin and we end this 3-week period with troubles. We begin with one trouble and then we accelerate, and at the end we have another trouble. The other meaning of the word is like barriers or fortress. So between the barriers is another definition for it. So these 3 weeks started actually last Shabbos and go till the third Shabbos. But on Shabbos, we don't express mourning, sadness, and grief. So the fast day of the 17th of Tammuz, Shavasar B'Tammuz, the fast day was on Sunday this year, last Sunday. We call it when it's supposed to be on Shabbos, when that's the actual date, but when the fast is pushed the next day, we call it a nidche, or a day that's pushed off. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through a couple of things from Tammuz, just from the 17th of Tammuz, from this day, just kind of as an introduction. And then what I wanted to do is I'm going to go through before we can actually mourn and understand the grief that the Jewish people go through during this time, all of us together as a nation, we need to appreciate a little bit what it's all about, what the beauty was, what the happiness was, what the greatness was, what the connection was, before we can begin to be sad about it. I'm going to begin with a story that I read recently. It's a true story. During the, we're going to say 2+ years of COVID, when this year the state of Israel, the current state of Israel, they canceled immigration to the land, people coming and living and becoming citizens. Since they canceled it, nevertheless, they still had their budget set to resettle immigrants according to the law of return in the land of Israel. So what they did was a very beautiful thing. There were many, many people, I think it was several thousand, I forgot the exact number, who were still in Ethiopia, many of them whose children and grandchildren and cousins and parents had already come to Israel, and yet they hadn't come yet. And some of them have been waiting already up to 20 years. And they had actually moved from their hometowns. They were sitting in Addis Ababa, the main city, waiting for the Israeli government to permit them to come to Israel, and they've been waiting. So the immigration department decided, you know what? We're going to, during this time, since immigration is closed, we're going to address ourselves to the Ethiopian community, finish the job. We're going to finish the job of bringing them over, make our final decisions, bring them over, put them in isolation until everyone is clear health-wise, and then begin to integrate them. And we have plenty of time to do this, since we're in a COVID mode, and society anyways was living in quarantine, so to speak. So they went to Ethiopia, and they determined it was difficult because these last several thousand, many of them, even some of them had intermarried, but they themselves were Jewish, or maybe one parent was Jewish, another was not, but many of their relatives, their first degree relatives were here. And so determining whether that was kind of the situation of these last groups. But they made that determination. They brought over many thousands, and they began their lives in Israel. Okay. For the most part, they chose to settle them in the south, in the area of Beersheba and its environments, and even south of Beersheba, which was really very fitting for the Ethiopian community, because they were used to a very hot and dry climate. So that was very comfortable place for them to be, in terms of the climate and the land, and even the earth was similar to the earth that they had farmed in their areas in Ethiopia. So there they were, and there were many schools who wanted them, who vied to bring in these Ethiopian children. And there's a particular religious school, a religious boys' school called the Yeshiva Katana, south of Beersheba, that had a very large group of Ethiopian boys studying in the school. One morning, one of the fathers comes to school, and he goes straight to the principal's office, and he says to the principal, I did not allow my son to come to school today. Why? He said, the Rebbe, the teacher, he was telling the class lies yesterday. I can't allow my child to be learning in a school that's teaching lies. So the principal immediately took this seriously, as we would want a principal to, and he invited the father to come in his office. He sat down, And the principal said to the father, can you tell me what were the lies that the teacher was teaching? And the father says, my son was taught yesterday that the holy temple in Jerusalem, the Beit HaMikdash, was destroyed. And the principal was like, he didn't know how to respond. He realized that the Ethiopian community, which really hooked into, there's a few different ideas of how they became. Some say that it was one of the 10 tribes, the tribe of Dan, good morning, that had traveled to Ethiopia. Some say it's from Malka Shva, I forgot how to say her name in English, the Queen of Sheba. Some say it was the Queen of Sheba during the time of King Shlomo, who built the Holy Temple, that she came because she heard he was the wisest man who ever lived, which was true. And she asked him, she came with a long list of her deep questions. He answered them to her great satisfaction. And then she became Jewish and came back. And over time, her community, her kingdom became Jewish. So we're not exactly sure how they started, but we know that the Ethiopian community was and is a full-fledged Jewish community. Nevertheless, many of them, especially living in the rural small towns, they were out of touch for almost 3,000 years with what was happening in the world. So they knew the stories from the time of King Shlomo HaMelech, and they knew about David who came before him, and they knew the 5 books of the Torah. But really, after the 5 books, there are more. Altogether, there are 24 books. If we take the entire base of the Bible Hebrew literature, there's 24 books. And many of the Ethiopian communities, especially in the odd rural places, were not familiar with any of them. They only knew the 5 books of the Torah. They did not know what we call the oral Torah, the Torah Shebaal Peh, had absolutely no idea that it existed. And so here they were, like in this, almost like if you would go back in time, like a science fiction movie or a novel, that this is where they were stuck in history. So this father never knew that the temple had been destroyed. Now we, 2,000 years later from the destruction of the second temple, we know that it was destroyed twice. And the principle, what went through his mind and his heart is, how am I going to break this to this father? And so it was gently and softly, because he also had to defend his teacher, who was not telling a lie. So he says as gently and softly as he can to the father, puts his hand on his shoulder, and he says, I know this is going to be difficult for me to share with you, but the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, was destroyed. In fact, it was destroyed twice, and both times on the exact same day. The father tore his clothes and he fell to the floor crying. The principal, so overcome by this man, that he also went on the floor with the father and he cried with him. He felt the heart of the father and they cried together. And they cried for a very, very long time. And then they were able to get up and put themselves together and talk about it. The father began to fill in. I mean, the principal began to fill in the father just with a kind of a loose overview of the history since the destruction of the first temple. So I read this story and I thought to myself, "Oi, that I should feel that I should be able to feel the searing pain and the disconnectedness that happened when we lost the temple. And not only did we lose the temple, but shortly thereafter, we lost prophecy. I can't even imagine what a world was like with the Holy Temple and with prophets walking in our midst. I can't begin to imagine. You know, we all have our struggles in life. We all have our questions. We all get up or don't sleep some nights because we have our particular struggles and our questions and our personal issues that we want to know which way to go and how to direct ourselves and what is the right path. We all have this. And I can't imagine what it was like at a time when we had the Beis Hamikdash and we had guidance in a connection that was so much closer to Hashem, to God, than we have today. And so here we are trying, and I'm so impressed. I don't know most of you women, but I'm in your personal quest, and I would really, I don't know, I'd like to get to know each and every one of you in a little way. I'd also, maybe I should give you my email, and so that we'll do a little bit of a survey for next week, because I want to make sure that if you came to this class with certain questions and certain goals, I want to make sure that we fulfill them. So maybe I'll give my email, and maybe Julie will, after class, she'll send out to everyone my email, and maybe we'll do 3 questions. One is, tell me a little bit about yourself. I would love to know, something that maybe is not obvious about you, either a talent or something that you love, a passion, something special that you value about yourself. That would be the first question. Second question is that we all signed up for this class together, so we're going to be walking a 3-week journey together. When you signed up for the class, maybe you thought about, maybe you didn't, but maybe take a moment and answer this question. At the end of these 3 weeks, what do I want to know or understand that I don't have now? And then I think the third level is, the third question would be, perhaps just tell me a little bit about your background. Should I be using more Hebrew? Should I use Hebrew and English so that I can be more targeted towards our specific audience? And don't worry if you want to write me longer rather than shorter, or if you want to make it short and sweet, whatever's comfortable for you. I want to make sure that we fulfill what you signed up for. Okay. Say that again. Oh, I have water. Thank you. May I just say something? I'm not. The next 3 questions are really everything leading up to the destruction. Right. Back from correct. Correct. So you might want to let everybody know that if they don't think they're going to get right. Correct. So I thank you, Julie. Right, you are absolutely correct, and that was why I told you when I walked in. I walked in with 4 different lesson plans because I wasn't exactly sure of my audience. Just at the tail end of a cold here. So what I'm doing in these 3 weeks is really just a very quick overview. I feel that if we don't have an overview of the history, then it's hard for us to appreciate what the grieving is about and what the mood is of this period and some of the laws. There's a new book, relatively new book, out by Rabbi Simcha Bunim Cohen. It's called Laws of Daily Living, the 3 weeks, Tisha B'Av and Other Fasts. I'll hold it up. It's relatively new. It's by Art Scroll. You can either order it online if you're interested, or it's at the bookstore in on Tui Avenue. So if you want more information, for example, which I'm not going to be going into in some of the laws related to the fast days, and a lot of the laws are related to the tone. When we understand the laws, then we understand the tone of it as well. We may go a little bit more into the tone, but not the laws. So if you want that is not the scope of our class, but it's a good read. And so I thought I'd just throw it out there for those who might be interested. All right. So I'm going to begin with Sunday, with the fast day of Sunday last week, assuming that this is material that, since this begins Bein Hamatzarim, between the barriers or between the troubles. The truth is, the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, we're going to get to that, but it actually begins a year and a half before. But on the 17th of Tammuz, there were 5 tragedies, and I'm just going to briefly go through the 5 tragedies because that kind of puts us where we need to be. The first one is, historically, I think we're familiar with the story in the Bible when Moshe Rabbeinu, went up to Mount Sinai and he received the Torah, and he came down. And when he came down, he saw that the Jewish people, some of them were involved, that they had created a golden calf, an idol, and they were dancing to it, worshiping it, different kinds of activities surrounding this golden calf. And when Moses saw that, he took the 10 commandments on the stone and he threw it down and it cracked. So that happened on this day. This happened on the 17th of Tammuz. So that's the first time in history where this day is marked as a sad, unfortunate day. The second point is that during the 3-year siege of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Holy Temple, this is the second temple, the Jews were forced to stop the daily sacrifice because they couldn't obtain the animals for it anymore. And it doesn't sound like such a sad thing offhand, but from the time that in the desert that they began the daily sacrifice, which was done in the morning and again in the later afternoon, from that moment, it was done every single day through the desert, through living in Israel, through building the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple. And what happened was, even though the Romans had surrounded Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, and they weren't allowing anyone to go in or out, even though it was surrounded, the Kohanim, the high priests, every day they would drop over the walls. There were several walls that had to be penetrated, but they would drop over the walls ropes, 2 ropes with baskets, and in the baskets were gold. And some of the Roman soldiers had their own business on the side. They would take the gold, they would put 2 lambs in the baskets, they would jerk on it, and then the Kohanim, the priests, would pull up the ropes, and then they had, for the 2 daily sacrifices, they had the lambs. On the 17th of Tammuz, on this day, the Kohanim put down the ropes with the baskets, and then the soldiers took out the gold, and instead of lambs, they put in pigs, and which is ultimate insult, obviously done intentionally. And so they pulled up the rope, brought into Beis Hamikdash 2 pigs instead of lambs, and they couldn't make the sacrifice on that day. That by itself was tragic, but it was also tragic because until then, people thought, oh, okay, the walls are surrounded. There's Roman soldiers every day for months. They have these battering rams going against the walls, and people in their houses day and night in their houses in Jerusalem are hearing bang, bang, bang against the walls. But even so, life, to the best they could, carried on normally. And in the Beis Hamikdash, everything was done as had been done in the past. And so on some level, they said, you know what, we're okay. We're okay. And maybe at some point the Romans will stop, something will happen. We're okay. We're being protected, and we're protected because of the daily sacrifice. And now that it's discontinued, that was like the first eye opener that, oh, maybe we don't have that protection. We can't be in denial anymore of what's really happening outside of our walls. So it was a big wake-up call. All right, number 3, the walls surrounding Jerusalem, and that was several layers of walls, depending on where around the city you were. They were at that point on that day, in addition to, stopping the daily sacrifice, they breached through all of the layers of walls, and soldiers began to enter, and then they went house by house, neighborhood by neighborhood, slaughtering, robbing, doing what we know soldiers do when they conquer. It took 3 weeks for them to do their destruction and feel that they've slaughtered enough people, taken enough prisoners, that now they work themselves all the time working towards the Beis Hamikdash, which is at the end of the 3 weeks, where they came and put it on and set it to fire. Okay. But before the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, there was a Roman general who, when they breached the walls, went straight in. His name was Apostomus, and he publicly took a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll, and he burned it and forced the Jewish community to watch it. And that's the first time in history that a Torah scroll was set on fire. Unfortunately, not the last time, but the first, yes. They did. They did. Yes. 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 During the 3 weeks, yes. Yeah. It was hand-to-hand combat. Yeah. Right. House to house, neighborhood to neighborhood. And that's why it took 3 weeks. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Thank you for answering that question, Julie. And then also on the 17th of Tammuz, which was fasted last Sunday, an idol was placed inside of the Beis Hamikdash. So we had within the Beis Hamikdash, we had the 2 pigs, we had the Sefer Torah scroll set to fire, and we had an idol put in there. Okay, so that is what happened. And of course, since then, down through history, this has been an unhappy day. It's been a sad day for us. And, the laws reflect, which is why I recommended the book, the laws reflect, we start with the 17th of Tammuz, taking upon ourselves certain, we don't make weddings, for example. There are certain, joyous occasions that we do not participate in. And as we march forward, we begin to take on sadder and sadder customs until for the 3 weeks until we get to the day of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av itself. Okay, so that's just a brief, that's how we begin Bein HaMetzarim. Okay, from there, I want to spend the rest of our time today, with everyone's permission, yes.
Okay, I just had a couple questions. Hi,
Good.
Lori.
Tell me your name again.
Lori.
Lori. Hi, Lori.
Was this prophesied by Hashem? Why did Hashem allow this?
Such a beautiful question. Such a
Okay.
beautiful question. So I want to, okay, the question was, and we hear this question, till today about the Holocaust. So that's why it's such a relevant, important question. How did Hashem allow this to happen to the Jewish people? Good. Okay. Let's talk for a moment about God's mission for the Jewish people and our relationship to God. The Jewish people have a very, very specific mission in this world. That mission is that we were taken out of slavery, out of Egyptian slavery. And we say in the Haggadah on Passover, we say that if God had not taken us out, we would still be slaves today. And some people laugh at that. They say, come on, we've come to the 21st century. On the other hand, if anyone travels, let's say, to India, we see to this day people living in a caste system, the same system that was created in the ancient world is still today. And people who were in the lower caste from ancient times, their descendants until today are. So someone said that this past Passover at our Seder, and when they said it, I stopped and I said, you're right. I haven't thought about that. So I don't know. The idea of slaves rebelling, the idea of slaves walking out, this is the first time in history it ever happened. There are other Spartacus in the Greek Empire. There are other slave rebellions of large groups of people. But that idea was born in Egypt, the Jewish people. And was given to the world the idea of freedom, which is why, by the way, when we just have the 4th of July, when we came to America, there's so many comparisons and so many sentences taken from the 24 books of the Torah, all over the beginnings of the foundation of this country. So that is number one, that God has a specific mission for us, a purpose. Part of why did we go into Mitzrayim, into Egypt, why we go in. So the Maharal tells us the reason we went in is because he had to take certain traits that we had acquired from the ancient world. He had to, the Maharal compares it to impure metals, that he had to melt out the impurities to just keep the pure. And that kind of was what happened during the 210 years of our slavery in Egypt. We were, going through that melting down and coming out as a more pure people. Of course, down through history, we always interact with our environment, and so we sometimes have to go through this process again. We interact, we pick up traits and admire traits of the nations that surround us and that we become a part of. And so we have to go through this process sometimes again and again. But that is the basic idea, is that God took us out of slavery because he wanted us to be his people, and we call it chosen people, but to serve God, to be his representatives in this world. And one of the ways we know to be his representatives is through the teachings that he gave us, which are in Hebrew called the Torah. Torah means teaching. So he gives us guidelines on many different levels. The more we read the Torah, the more levels we're able to understand. It amazes me that we do the Parsha, the Sedra, each week, the Torah portion, and each week, year after year after year, we find something that we never saw before. It's an amazing thing, that how infinite it is. I'll just take a little side. Like I have my husband and I are very close friends with a couple that her mother is Jewish, her father is not. His father is Jewish, his mother is not. They both thought they were Jewish. They got married. And then he found out that according to the Torah, according to Jewish law, he's not Jewish, and he became Jewish. He has a PhD in chemistry. He's a very, very high level scientist, and he's brilliant. He learned everything there is to know about chemistry. I said, good. He became Jewish. Really, it was initially to please his wife, and then he became very interested in Judaism and learning Torah. And he thought, okay, Torah is going to be like chemistry. I'll start studying Torah and I'll learn everything there is to learn about the Torah. And then I'll be an expert. This is going to be my next field to conquer. Well, here he is about over 40 years later. He's actually a rabbi today. He became an Orthodox rabbi, as well as still continuing to be a high-level scientist. And he says to us all the time, the Torah is bottomless. The more I learn it, the more questions I have, the more there is to learn. That is, and so that's where we're at. So it is, number one, our relationship to God and understanding that we are his representatives. Even if we don't choose to be his representatives, the world is looking at us. Probably most of us have had experiences and moments where someone says something either positive, admiringly about us that they recognize we're Jewish, or about other Jews, or they say something, that's not so nice about us. But I think we've all experienced it. The world actually understands it on some level, that we are here to represent God in his world, and to be, as it says several times in those 24 books of the Torah, of the teachings, that we are here to be a light to the world. In order to do that, we need two things. One, our relationship to God, and second, to learn and understand the teachings of the Torah. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have another one.
You have another one? Okay, let's take it. Great.
This, I always, many years, I can never, the Jews were separate from all the other nations way back then.
Say it again, the Jews.
Were always separate from all the other nations who did sacrifice a lot of human sacrifice. I still don't understand why God needs all our sacrifices. Need us to kill animals, and it wasn't like one or two, it was thousands and thousands. And that was one thing that always bothered me.
Great.
I can't
Okay,
understand.
so this is a general question, but it's okay. We talked about sacrifice here, and a korban, and it. I'm gonna answer your question. The question is, why does God need our sacrifices? Okay, so I'm gonna take that question backwards and answer it in rephrase it to a 21st century question. Then we'll move backwards in history.
He has our prayers. He has that. Why couldn't Hashem ask for prayers thousands of years ago?
Okay, so let's take it from right now, from prayers. Okay, let's ask the same question. Does God need my prayer? No, I'm seeing some heads going no. Does God need my prayer? No, God doesn't need my prayer. So what is the purpose of prayer? For us, okay? For number one, for us. Number two, relationship with Hashem, okay? Our praying is our relationship to Hashem. Any other ideas? And here.
I mean, when the parents like other people perhaps,
Okay.
or compassionate, or
Good. Good. Okay. So, and I'm going to say, and it's really something I talk about before Rosh Hashanah more, but prayers do impact on in three places: our relationship to God, our relationship to other people, and ultimately our relationship to ourselves, right? Those are the three biggies, okay? So God doesn't need my prayers, but in giving prayers, in my offering prayers, if I'm doing it mindfully, if I'm not doing it mindfully, I've still done a good thing. I'm not going to, deny that, because myself included, we all have days and all have moments when we're not mindful of our prayers and every word that we're saying, right? So first of all, the word Hallel it's a reflexive word, and it's really like analysis, self-analysis. Everything that when we pray reflects back to us. So it is talking to God, and I'm going to put this kind of in parentheses, but I think it's helpful. When we learn Torah, that is God talking to us. When we pray, that is us talking to God. Should I repeat that? When we learn Torah, God is talking to us. When we pray, we are talking to God. Now, we have the ability to pray to God anytime. He never has a busy signal. His Wi-Fi is never not working. There's no storms that will knock it out. We can, and I have sometimes, I began that sometimes we have sleepless nights, that we're chewing on something, and we've got a dial tone waiting for us. We can stop anytime, day or night, any place, and we can talk to God. Nevertheless, we do have formal prayers, and the formal prayers are helpful to train us in how do I approach God? I'm this little teeny tiny human being, like one of billions and billions and billions of people in history and on this planet. How do I begin to touch God, to approach God, to have a conversation with, to have a relationship with God? But he tells us in the Torah that he cares. He really, really cares. He cares not just about us, he cares about every one cell and molecule and piece of dirt and sand in the universe. He cares. How I can't, and I don't think anyone can begin to wrap their head around how that works, but that is it. So I talk to God, and I talk to God myself, but I also talk to God with formalized prayers. It gives me an appropriate way of thinking, just like our parents teach us to say please and thank you and to open the door for people. There's a formal and an informal. I can talk to Hashem informally anytime I want, but I can also learn the formal way. And through learning it, it also reflects back on me internally, on myself and how I feel about myself with other people, and of course, myself in my relationship to God and growing the relationship with God. Okay. So that is prayer today. Prayer was developed by a one-time body of men created after the destruction of the first temple, before the rebuilding of the second temple, called the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, the men of the Great Assembly. It was 70 men set up one time in history, and as each one died, that was it. They didn't replace them. And they set down Jewish life, how it's going to be for the future. And that was really translating all of the sacrifices into prayers. Some of those prayers already existed. Some of them are coming from the Torah. For example, I think we all know the sentence of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that comes straight from the Torah. There are many other sentences that are used in prayer and that were used as like the formula that went with the sacrifices that come from the Torah. But then there are other ones that were written either before or after, like introduction and conclusion, or in of up themselves. And some of them were developed through the next, through the next years going forward in history. And they were to replace the sacrifices. So I want to say I've done a lot of thought myself. I tend towards vegetarianism. And so I've done a lot of thinking about sacrifices and korbanos. And I started with the very modern mindset of animal rights, right? And I had to, I moved through it. And I mean, certainly for Shabbos, I prepare, and also during the week sometimes for my family, I prepare meat and chicken and, and eat of it myself as well. And it dawned on me one day when I was shopping and I bought this little styrofoam tray with this pretty little chicken cutlets all set on it that, oh, I'm so far removed from the animal. I don't even, I mean, it could be strips of soy for all I know. It's so far removed when it's on this little tray from the animal, and it's already kashered for me. It's already been made kosher. Like, it's hard for me to relate to this as an animal, and that animal was slaughtered by a rabbi who was very carefully trained, and he himself, when he's slaughtering it, he has, many thoughts and things that I have no idea, because I've never studied the laws of slaughtering animals. But it's much more than even today when I eat meat or chicken or turkey or whatever. It's much more than meets the eye even today for us. I'm only seeing that final product when it's gone through so many stages and it's finally packaged. So we're talking about in the ancient world, when animals in an agricultural setting had a lot of value to them, and they had a relationship with animals, and they took care of those animals. And so you're really giving something of yourself when you brought a sacrifice. And very often, and I only know this because before Yom Kippur, we sometimes take the chickens and, around their head, and to connect to Doris's mother, my in-laws, my husband's parents, were Holocaust survivors, and we would take them every year before Yom Kippur. And it wasn't like today, you go to like a schoolyard in the middle of the afternoon, and they have all the chickens in a nice little cage for you. Many, many years ago, when we started doing this custom, we had to go to a slaughter, and we had to get up before dawn. We would get up and wake all our children and throw them in the van in their pajamas at 3 a.m. And we did this before sunrise, and we did it in an alley behind the slaughterhouse. And you saw, the feathers, and you saw the blood, and then it went on a conveyor belt. And one time one of my sons took the heads and put them in his pocket. I have a lot of daughters, and on the way back, took out a chicken head, and the blood dripping, and my daughters all were hysterical. And it was a very different experience for me. But my father-in-law, when we would go every year, Oliver Shalom, he's not here any longer, but when we would go, because he lived in Auschwitz, he lived with death. He saw his brother shot before his eyes. He had his family separated from him and put into the gas chambers. And he would take this chicken and he would hold it very firmly, and he would take the head of the chicken, and his eyes would meet the eyes of the chicken, and he would talk to the chicken, and he would tell the chicken that you are going instead of me. I am so full of sins that I deserve to be the one who's going to die. But you're going to absorb my sins for me, and you're going to do it. He would talk to this chicken, like have a man-to-man or man-to-chicken conversation with the chicken. And when he finished that conversation, he would stroke the chicken and he would kiss it and he would thank it. And tears would run down his eyes. That's a Holocaust survivor, and who lost wife and 2 young sons and his entire family, and married many after the war and rebuilt his life. And he cried and he cried and he cried with that chicken before he gave it over. I'm just saying it to you because we live a relationship with animals. So I can't possibly, and I never lived in an agricultural world. You know, I live in the city. My children wanted a pet and I bought them fish. And I think we had 2 birds once, also 2 parakeets, but I don't relate to the animal world. And I think most of us don't. And so we can't understand what the word is sacrifice. What were they giving up? Yeah, it was something important, because if it wasn't something important, it wouldn't be meaningful. And I sometimes try and think about that, especially around Yom Kippur, when I think about my father-in-law, Oliver Shalom. I think about that, you know, my prayer is I'm standing up and I'm offering words. I'm not coming with something that's important to me, that I took good care of, that when that animal is born, an animal that's going to be a sacrifice, it can't have a blemish on it and it can't have done work. But you take care of it, and every day you took special care of it. You know, you would clean it and you would feed it and you would keep it separate from the other animals who were work animals. Like, you were really giving something of yourself. It's really a sacrifice. You're making a sacrifice. So having said all of that, I hope it answers your question at least a little bit. Honestly, it doesn't completely, because I wasn't there, right? And I daven along with all of us. I pray that one day in the future, we will understand it, that we will be given that privilege, that, you know, it says that he who mourns, he who grieves what we lost, the Holy Temple and the life of the Holy Temple when we had it, only he who grieves it and mourns it and longs for it will be the ones who will one day have it again. I think we're at time. Are there any other questions? Naomi? Oh, good. Okay.
Saying about why did
The destruction.
right?
There's right, and that's right. That's right. That's something that, you know, as we perhaps march through history, we'll grow to understand that. And that has to do with, we said there's 3 things: relationship to God, relationship to fellow men. So Sina Schina would be relationship to fellow men and relationship to ourselves. So it would fit in that category. And yes, it's definitely a part of it. Actually, all 3 are part of what caused the destruction. All right, thank you so much. And thank you, Julie, for setting this up. Thank you to the L'chaim Center. I look forward to sending out an email and everyone, take a survey, answer your questions so that we can, and if there are any additional questions, the ones here had wonderful questions. I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you, whether in person or on Zoom, and look forward to marching forward together through the Jewish journey through history. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We can't hear you, Julie. I can't hear you.
You take my seat.
You can't hear me?
Thank you. I'll see you next week.
Now I,
Okay, so I just said thank you all very much. I have a screenshot of who all was on here, so if I have your email, I'll just add it. But if I don't, please make sure that it goes into the chat so that I could get everybody on. Okay, and thank you all very much.
thank you.
See you all soon. Bye-bye.